The Philadelphia 76ers have hit a home run this offseason by adding Paul George to this roster and build three stars alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. However, they still have to fill in the gaps and complete this roster to look these true contenders across the NBA in the eye. Well, we got some news on some potential players that they could be targeting, how they're maneuvering to get this particular monetary situation. So I want to break down the latest reports, talk about each of these names, and talk about why they could be difference makers for this Sixers team. So I want to start off with the most recent report, this coming from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald. He writes that, quote, as the Philadelphia Inquirer's Keith Pompey just reported, the Philadelphia 76ers have had discussion with Heat free agent Haywood Highsmith. The 76ers have also had discussion with Heat free agent Caleb Martin as they scan the free agent market for options to fill out the roster, according to a league source. So currently, as we're looking at the Sixers roster, we have an idea for their starting four, not necessarily who that fifth guy is going to be. And at this point, we're obviously talking about Tyrese Maxey at the 1, Joel Embiid at the center position, Paul George at likely the small forward, although he can move up and down a little bit. Kelly Oubre certainly in the mix, and I will note once again that I thought it was interesting to me that the first report of Kelly Oubre re-signing, he was mentioned as the team's starting two guard, so I do think that is worth noting there, but they need a fourth guy, and Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith are players that potentially fit that bill. So let's talk a little bit about each guys. I first want to start with Haywood Highsmith this year. He's coming off a season with the Miami Heat, 27 years old, he's 6'7", just 6.1 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, 1.1 assists, shot 46.5% from the field, 39.6% from three, also shot 43.8% on corner threes, and 58.4% of his shots overall coming from beyond the arc. He is a guy who made his path through the NBA, came right through the Sixers organization. He started his career here, played with the Blue Coats for, I believe, 2 full seasons, had a chance to check in and take in his game from down there in Delaware. He's an impressive talent. He's been a guy that is one of these athletes that is toolsy players that's starting to put it together. And to his credit, down in Miami, he certainly took some significant strides forward for being more of a complete package there. I like Haywood Highsmith. I am interested in him adding to the Sixers rotation. I don't know if I think of him as that surefire missing piece to the starting lineup. He's a bit guy that I would be more comfortable with in more of a bench role. However, the other name that was mentioned in this report, being Caleb Martin, is a guy that I think absolutely could fill that here. And to dive into what Caleb Martin brings to the floor here, take a look at these stats. 10.0 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 0.7 steals per game. Not as great of shooting splits, that he did shoot just 43.1% from the field and 34.9% from beyond the arc. Also just 32.9% from the corner there, 92.6% of his threes being assisted, and 41.5% of his shots coming from beyond the arc. He is 28 years old and a little bit smaller at 6'5", but he is a guy that is a pugnacious defender. He is versatile, he is athletic, and the dude is a straight up gamer. That he was hitting some big time shots for this Heat team and has played a really notable part in their runs through the playoff there. That we have seen Martin be a guy that is a playoff riser. There is something about when he gets going that you feel it, how he can take over a game, which I don't feel about these other players that we are going to mention there, obviously with Haywood Highsmith. And the next guy that I did want to bring up that I think I probably would circle as the most likely name at this point in time is Dorian Finney-Smith here. And to dive into the official report here, we have the Philadelphia Sixers are still loading up and are now showing interest in Dorian Finney-Smith per Michael Scotto. Quote, the 76ers had exploratory interest in trading for Nets forward Dorian Finney-Smith, league sources told Hoops Hype, but nothing is considered imminent there. Now to talk a little bit about Dorian Finney-Smith here, let's take a look at his stats here. That this season with the Brooklyn Nets, he averaged 8.5 points per game, 4.7 rebounds, 1.6 assists there, 42.1% from the field, and 34.8% from three. He started off the season red hot from three, and then these numbers really shrunk down as the season went on. He's 31 years old, 6'7", 35% on corner threes, which is another number that I would like to be increased there, but the highest volume from beyond the arc, with 65.8% of his shot attempts coming from long range there. Finney-Smith is another guy with extensive playoff history, that he was a big part of those Mavericks runs when he still played for that team, playing next to Luka Doncic. He would play a similar role here in Philly as more of a 3-and-D archetype. He's a guy that I think in a more minimized setting, like Philadelphia versus compared to Brooklyn, where he kind of had to create his own shot, there's just not enough options for other teams to be worried about, that I think he will look far better in a more minimized role. So I'm a little bit optimistic, and I do think he is a good rebounder there. Now, why I'm saying that I do believe he's the most likely target is a lot of the moving around that these Sixers are doing. And what I mean by that, to dive into this report here, this being on the initial Michael Scotto report, Zach Chavalella breaking things down, and shout out to Zach from Philly Sports Network there. He writes 3 interesting Sixers notes among all the great info in here by Michael Scotto. Paul Reed expected to be waived/traded. The Sixers have interest in Dorian Finney-Smith, and Adem Bona is expected to land a standard NBA contract and earn a roster spot. And why those are notable right there is, for starters, that we do know that Bona is a guy who was drafted in the second round by this Sixers team, and that you don't typically see teams get to, and does show the trust in the Sixers there with Bona. And that's also very tied to the decision to move on from Paul Reed, as they are cut from a similar cloth stylistically as a player. That both these guys are a little bit undersized centers who use their athleticism, use their length, that are very active, high motor, both guys. I will say Bona is a little more simplified version of a player than Paul Reed, that Paul Reed just has that tendency to do a little bit too much on the floor all too often. That's not quite Bona, that he's more trustworthy as a coach. He's a really high-level shot blocker, over 1.5 blocks per game in each of his 2 seasons at UCLA. He was a Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. And again, the motor is going to be the biggest thing that stands out. That as high motor as Paul Reed was, I think Bona is going to be another level even compared to that. And the more notable storyline here is the finances. That we do know with NBA trades, and particularly in today's ecosystem, that the finances have just as much to do with a trade going through as anything to do with the talent. And the Sixers are currently in talks, and I dropped a video earlier talking a little bit deeper about the financial implications of this Buddy Hield trade that still seems to be in the works at the time of recording this. It's been quite some time, been over 15 hours since the initial report, so one would think that has to be a little bit close to completion, but it does feel like a ton of teams getting their hands in the pot and making sure this one goes through. So a little bit more notable trade than I think ultimately people are expecting there. But from the Sixers angle, that moving on from Paul Reed is a little bit of financial flexibility, that they are going to open up a little bit more room for finances through this Buddy Hield trade, and that does absorb or create the possibility to absorb Dorian Finney-Smith into their salary cap situation there. So those are the 3 biggest names that we are targeting. I think it's pretty clear the archetype of player that the Sixers are certainly looking for, and I do think that is a good name. I will say I would like much more of a clear power forward than any of these names we're mentioning. While I would be comfortable on bringing these guys in and having them as options to guard, the opponents that they're going to need to. The Mikal Bridges of the world, the Jason Tatums, the Jaylen Browns, that the Sixers have Paul George as a clear-cut option for that, but they're going to need another guy. And even as great as Kelly Oubre was defensively, I would like another name in that mix there. I will say a trio of Kelly Oubre, Paul George, and Caleb Martin, to me, stands out as you look at that and you're a little bit intimidated, that you can see that doing some real damage on opposing teams on the defensive side of the floor, and each of their guys having their strengths on offense as well. So that's something that's pretty appealing to me. But I think if they can land any of these 3, that would be a huge win for this Sixers team. And I'm still of the mindset that I do want a true power forward brought in. I've seen some whispers of a Dario Saric reunion. I would certainly be open to that there. There's even some talk for Mario Hezonja coming up from overseas, that he was I believe an MVP this year over there, a guy that was a former first-round pick that didn't pan out in the NBA the first go-around. I would be optimistic to give him another chance and see what happens. That's the type of low-risk, high-reward deal that could honestly provide the Sixers with a huge leg up on the opponents there. And Hezonja is a guy who was a sniper at a point in time, can shoot off movement, can shoot off screens, has a little creation, and he is big. So that's another name to keep an eye on there. But it's clear the Sixers are still trying to round out the roster. So those are the biggest names to keep an eye on right now. There also has been some talks with Reggie Bullock on a potential minimum. That's a guy that I'm definitely interested in, and surprised sort of the lack of buzz for what has been brought in there to dive into what he brings to the table. Nothing much to see, as he had a down year with 2.2 points per game, 1.7 rebounds, but he was a 40.3% three-point shooter and shot 55%. But ultimately, a lot of work still to be done on this Sixers roster. So we will see what happens from there, but those are the names that are currently popping up and guys that I do think should be worth paying attention to at this point in time. There will be more clarity once this Buddy Hield trade is completed, which should be in the near future. I'm surprised that it has not been already at the point of this recording, so it does feel like it's going to happen soon. But these are all win-now players that have playoff experience and fit the same archetype that they're looking for. Pugnacious defenders who can shoot the three, who are closer to that true 3-and-D archetype than the Sixers have had. So welcome to Philadelphia for whoever Daryl Morey can get this deal done. But I want to hear from you guys of how you would prioritize these names in the comments there. Make sure you're leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel. If not, drop your comments below for who you want to see in a Sixers uniform. And I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.